Today we want to talk about a topic, all-rounder versus specialist. So what does that mean? For example, some dogs are all-round farm dogs. An example could be the Australian cattle dog, a dog that guards, a dog that kills vermin if possible, can guard the premises, and also is able to manage the cattle. So in this example, the Australian cattle dog is a good dog on harsh cattle like bulls that don't want to listen, or semi-feral, whereas he's a little bit too rough on, for example, sheep, and also doesn't have the speed that a specialist does have. In this case, the Kelpie. So the Kelpie is less of a good working dog on cattle because it's a little bit too soft, but very energetic, fast, and good working dog with sheep. Also semi-feral sheep. So that gives you some insight on what I'm talking about. Also, for example, here you see a Patterdale on the leash. This is a specialist for earthwork, whereas a Generalist that can do earthwork but is also good at other work is the German hunting terrier, also known as the German Jagd terrier. So this is a dog that can be used as a terrier on the ground like this one, but also very good in tracking down rounded animals or tracking down hawks, so feral hawks or even the wild swine. That example gives you some additional insight, because the Australian cattle dog is a little bit too rough, or not too rough to be used on sheep, but can be used on sheep. Also Patterdales are used on hawks, but they are not as good at it as, for example, a German Jagd terrier is. And why is that? I already mentioned Australian cattle dog is a little bit too rough, and that could damage the sheep, and also it doesn't have that condition and speed that a Kelpie does have. But the same attends to the Patterdale terrier. Although being very small, it's like a catch dog. So normally a catch dog would be the size of an American Bulldog, Dogo Argentino, or something to like for working on hawks. But this little guy will try to do the same with only a very small fraction of the weight and strength of those bigger dogs. So you can imagine it will be effective on holding the hawk, especially if you have multiple terriers on one hawk, which is often the case, whereas the bigger catch dog often work in a little bit smaller packs. But you can imagine that a hawk would be easily hurting smaller dogs than bigger dogs, and also he will just throw them around, whereas a big dog is harder to manage it, to control. So this gives you a little bit of insight, and also some views on this topic. Another example I will tell you is that if you want a very good dog for military police operations, so the dog that you can really perform, and it's also very good against ill intent personnel, you could go for the Belgian Malinois. This is the supreme athlete and will be the best at those tactical operations. Whereas if you want more an all-round guard dog that can do quite some things that the Belgian Malinois can do, but has a lot more laid back character, is easier on the family members, it's also easier and more trusted with children, one could go, for example, with a Rottweiler, a German Rottweiler. This dog is bigger, has a more dog-like Molosser type character, so more laid back, but is a good working breed and will also have more of an intimidation factor, so it can prevent things easier than the very focused and very driven Malinois can do. So there are some insights on what you want. Also, for example, if you want to have a dog with man-stopping capabilities, a Rottweiler will be better, because if a Rottweiler hits you, it's harder to get away from it than it is from a Malinois. Malinois is fast, so of course you can chase easier. But once the Rottweiler latches on, you really have a problem. And it can also be the case, for example, if you want a very big dog that has certain characteristics of a very small dog, there are more specialists than the medium type of dogs, because they can be used on more purposes. There are some exceptions. For example, very small terriers can be used on any small earth quarry, whereas the bigger ones don't fit in all the quarry holes. So that could be an exception. But then again, they will be hurt a lot more than small ones.